Hello everyone, Ora here. It's another dungeon PoV video today. But this one's going to be a bit of an interesting one, bit of a review, comparison, and application of points that have been pointed out to me in recent days by members of the community. So it's in Necrotic Wake, 20. It is timed, so it's another timed one off the list. And we're going to go into it. We are going to focus primarily on my own gameplay at this point, after a few comments were made in a previous video. So I'm not going to comment any whiffs, ifs, ands, and buts for other people. We're going to just focus purely on my gameplay, what I did wrong, what went well, and what I think about playing this new build. Because it's something I'm not familiar with and something I haven't touched for quite a while. So we will get into it. And for those that don't know, this build is using Tempest the Lightbringer rather than DR, with an Ocular Gland and the PvP 1 minute on use trinket. I would prefer, given I'm now a Tauren, to use Overwhelming Power Crystal from DOS. I have yet to acquire it. I will be doing a weekly chest video after this one and releasing them both round about the same time later today. So who knows? We might get lucky and get an overwhelming power crystal. Right, so first things first. We go into the dungeon and I have to pop up immediately because one of my biggest concerns with this going forward is relearning how to aim Tempest to the Lightbringer. In one of my previous guides for 9.0.5, I did explain that you have to be careful where you aim them. And I think for the start of this, I was a little bit too fixated on that rather than things like kicks and everything else I should have been worrying about. So the start of this particular dungeon is very, very messy on my part. I miss kicks. I should really drop Fist of Justice talent and pick up Blinding Light for the extra interrupt, seeing as we were running a relatively low kick group, and obviously I need to be wary of stormings. So just trying to wrap my head around different things. Not entirely sure why I immediately got launched into the air there. Obviously got caught by a despawning Tempest the Lightbringer. Not Tempest the Lightbringer. Storming. You can see, I've still got Tempest the Lightbringer on my head. One observation I do have with regards to the Ocular Gland is I imagine this is a trinket that gets a lot more benefit out of better skilled players. I'm still taking a lot of unnecessary damage through these dungeons, which means that there are points when the Ocular Gland is actually a detriment to my stats. I am losing mastery. So that is something I need to work on how to mitigate damage. But for general DPS use, with packs like these, it is definitely visible the amount of damage I'm doing. One thing I will say, and one thing that I did find to be problematic, is that due to my trinket order, my macro that traditionally uses IQD with wings, which is a use 14, I didn't put my unused trinket in 14, I put it in slot 13. So there are points through this dungeon where my trinket desyncs because I forget to press it. You can see there that I had to lay on hands myself to get my health back up, because one thing that I didn't know, and hasn't been a problem in previous keys when I've done this, is the tanks never really had the kite. So I've never noticed that these Stitch Vanguards, when they cast their Bone Claw, it hits the nearest target. Think a Taldazar and other dungeons like that, where as a melee DPS you have to be wary of it. I didn't know this, so I was taking a lot of unnecessary damage. Which may explain why I was dying so much in the previous packs. Because Stormy would run out, And me not knowing that that was a mechanic, because it's not something I've encountered as a problem previously, all of a sudden I get slapped for a good portion of my health. But at the moment, we are doing okay in terms of overall damage. We're a little bit higher than usual. We've yet to see what the damage profile looks like on bosses, but I'm already kind of 1,000, 1,200 DPS higher than normal. And it has just been 2 larger packs. Again, with a little bit more practice, this will get better. One thing that I will note as well, and something that I have seen certain Ret Paladins do this week, so I thought to properly try it, was I also ran Mechanicos for this dungeon. Probably won't be doing that in the future, because I don't like how it desyncs with Pelagos. Or desyncs with Final Reckoning for my Divine Storm windows. So I kind of got into this very, very weird situation where I could hit Divine Storm and my Reckoning would just be used on its own. It was a very weird feeling, and I think I'd prefer to have the extra mastery. Although in large AoE pulls, I can see the damage from Mechanicos and the freedom that gives you being quite good. I've seen the top Ret Paladin in the world using Mechanicos this week. So is viable, but it's a little bit too different for me. So pretty much just cracking on. The single target damage is alright at the moment, although we do have to make allowances for the fact that we do have the Kyrian buff. When the start of this particular fight, we did have multiple targets to cleave off. So it was still funnel damage for the most part, but there were aspects of cleave to that. But still, the DPS is fairly respectable. 11.7k at the moment. Trying to use a Divine Storm to get across there to kill that ad, when I kind of realised that we had a boomy to deal with it. I picked up, obviously, the Mastery Champions brand, which, with the Ocular Gland, definitely does stack, which was an interesting thing. Playing around with gear was a little bit interesting as well, because I tried to keep my haste value at around 18%. Because anything less than that, although I could have more crit, versatility, and mastery, it just feels very slow, and I'm not sure where the balance comes into hitting harder versus hitting faster. Because obviously being able to hit slightly faster helps with our holy power generation in the forms of Crusader Strike. It's not a huge margin, but it feels very clunky. Again, I go below half health. One thing that is nice to see is there are these packs where I seem to be doing more consistent larger AoE, which is nice and is definitely something that if I continue doing 20s, and start pushing into 21s, 22s, especially on these fortified weeks, I will probably have to get the hang of. I am hoping to continue doing 20s in the coming weeks and be able to work out exactly kind of where the threshold is between slapping targets around priority or cleaving. Now, one self-note that will need to be mentioned is these Necromancer packs. Realistically, I should have been single targeting, but I pad like a child, and it results in my death, because as I'm padding and taking aggro, I get a well, and I also get a couple of melees, so I pretty much died there to a Necrotic Bolt and a Grim Fate. Now, the Necrotic Bolt I should have kicked. The volley should have also been kicked as well. So if I'd used my stun and a kick, would have done all right. And this is what I mean. This is something that I need to be a lot more proactive about and be vocal in calls, calling kicks, and marking targets. Because end of the day, I'm a bright paladin, so I should really be marking things star and saying they're my kicks. But that's a ongoing thing that I have to get back into the habit of doing. Because I used to do it a lot as a rogue, and it seemed to drop off. Almost as if, like, oh, I don't have that much CC anymore, I don't need to worry about it. But no, Ora, you do. So, yeah. Now, I do like fighting these skeletal marauders because I can pretty much just execution sentence, pummel into it, and they will detonate as soon as the execution sentence hits, and it's a pretty nice feeling. I get to pop there. It's nice. Again, another Necromancer pack, and I kind of pad with Divine Storms. I see many number plates and proceed to hit the Divine Storm button, which makes my DPS look more impressive, but would probably be more effective to Templar's Verdict. Which does kind of feed into the fact that at some point I do need to craft Magistrate's Judgment and give that a go on Ring. Unfortunately, though, I have been somewhat lacking in recent weeks with Torghast. I kind of used Divine Resonance as my be-all and end-all legendary, and as a result, my my Tempest to Lightbringer legendary is actually 235, and some of that stat weighting is probably responsible as well for the lower damage, because I do have a very poor belt. But the priority, I think, going forward is I am going to craft Magistrate's Judgment as Ring once I've got the 5,000 Soul Ash that I need, which should be this week. So I can play around with the Divine Resonance, Legendary, and MJ to see how we do this week. I believe I'll probably be running DR this week, with it being a tyrannical week, but we will see. I'll have a nosy and see what the top Rets in the world are running this week. Again, this is something I always forget to do, especially with Ice Boy, and that is picking up his Anima Orb. I always remember to do it with the 2 DPS, but that's because I have a hard-on for Mastery. I like the amount of Mastery it gives me. I used to pick up Volcanic Plume, but I don't like how it's only got like 4 procs per minute. And those procs can be really bad. Again, this is kind of another situation where my positioning gets me killed. I stand in that Shadow Well. I strafed it to the right when I should have strafed it to the left. So I got clapped by 2 Shadow Wells. So, misplay on my part, and something I need to be wary of, but still. I could, at this point, I could take the time to complain that I have a new keyboard and I am getting used to the mouse, the key sizes, but no, I have a disposition to strafe right, which is rather funny given the fact I'm left-handed. So don't know where that comes from, but anyway, needless death. Probably should have contributed a little bit more in terms of DPS there, but no. One thing to note, and something that is kind of funny, is I'm actually bottom DPS this dungeon. Thankfully, not by as much as I was for the 19 Necrotic Wake 2 chest that we did, and I will still be putting that up on the channel despite the fact I've done a 20, and I'll be putting that up because that is me running my DR build, rather than Tempest of the Lightbringer build. So I'll discuss kind of pack-to-pack pull, and because they're both this, they were done last week, so Fortified Volcanic, not Volcanic, Volcanics this week, Bursting, Storming, with the Tormented, we'll be able to see kind of like the pack-to-pack pull differences, because from a 19 to a 20 there's not that much health difference, and you'll kind of see that I don't make as many positional errors, but I make errors in other ways. because I was kind of thrown in the deep end. Now, we do end up in a rather unique position here, in that there was miscommunication and it nets in a wipe, unfortunately, because that fear goes through. I then bop Puff to try and help time out by removing the bleed component, so healing becomes a little bit easier. And this is one of those points that I'm talking about where having blinding light would be beneficial. Yes, it'd be immediately broken, but as a last ditch effort to stop the final harvest, because if you CC them, if the mobs are CC'd when final harvest goes out, they don't actually detonate. And you will see in the next pull of this, because as I said, unfortunately this is a wipe, we end up demoralizing roaring. Oh, actually no, I think Stormy does it here, actually. We're about to see it. So combat res goes out on time. We try to get this done. The mobs are about to go into a final harvest in 7, and Stormy positions himself to sort it. Time uses Fear Undead, or Turn Evil, and final harvest cast into a demoralizing roar, which kills them. Unfortunately though, the 3 of them are now going to be able to do 32% health, and it ends in a unfortunate wipe. So they're going to go down in a minute, because the reanimated mages get the frostbolt volleys off. And that's just unfortunate. It did eat a lust, but it's fine. We've got just over 19 minutes to do Armath. Surgeon Stitchflesh is a pretty fast kill, and so's Nelthor. So advance forward slightly. To just Stormy running back. We're discussing what's going on, what went wrong, and it was a case of a spear missing the executioner. So it had just hit Armath, which made that fight a little bit more difficult than it needed to be. Something to note going forward, because the things like the spears and stuff do actually damage these Tormentor mobs as well. So, pretty much going for a pull, no real problems. I pick up my orb before going into my burst, because I want the extra mastery, and then I just go into my burst. Don't really worry too much about the lack of targets to AoE off. Nothing really to state, or except for, you can see here that my PvP trinket is still off cooldown. This was the point where I realised that my macro was the wrong way around. And kind of just thought, crap. So kind of just held off pressing it, which was a massive loss of strength, but I had nothing to go with it. That particular ad there, again, miscommunication on my part. I do need to be a lot more vocal in my stuns. Observation going forward, because that meant that Stormy wouldn't have needed to waste his demoralizing roar, or if he was going to use it to mitigate boss damage, then I didn't necessarily need to use my stun. Time and I both overlapped our turn evils there. Realistically, I should have just let time deal with that, but no, I tried to assist. Because I do try to use turn evil whenever I get the opportunity, and one of the best times for me to do it is Gobloth in Plaguefall, using it on the aberrations and the large smorgasbords that he summons. So Armath went down pretty quickly. Did cost us two and a bit minutes, but it wasn't too bad. So we've got 1540 to do 2 bosses and the rest of the trash upstairs. Now, again, Stormy's pretty good. percentages and things like that, so we never have to really worry about. We've not had to backtrack as of yet. There was a Sanguine Depths we did where we overpulled slightly, and I was playing my Warlock for that, but still, overpulling slightly on a 15 isn't too bad. But Sanguine Depths is an odd one. You can accidentally pull too much or accidentally pull too little. That was a Drain Fluids that I kicked just in time. I still think a tick went off. Now, I don't know if it'll be worth me trying to farm DOS for an Overwhelming Power Crystal, because if I swap the Strength Trinket from PvP to something like a 429 OPC, then my burst is probably going to be a lot higher, especially when my wings is up, given I'm a Tauren and the amount of crit that thing gives. Because even a normal mythic version pretty much doubles my current amount of crit. Or at least it did. But I've had a couple of rings and can play around with my gear a little bit more now. Because although crit itself isn't too desirable of a stat, given wings gives us 20% of it, 20% chance to crit, it can help, especially as a Tauren, because we get that additional crit damage through it. So be nice to kind of sim and play around with. Alternatively, I'm going to have to go sit in PvP, and I'm going to have to hit 1800 again this season, which wasn't a particularly fun experience last season because I had to pug my way up to 1800, and I don't really want to be doing it again this season. But if the PvP trinket is the only way for me to do it, then I'll have to. Interesting thing so far at this point in the dungeon, my average DPS is 9.5k, which is one of the higher DPSs I've had. Yeah, so not really too much to say with regards to Sogadon and the rest of this trash. It pretty much follows its usual pattern. I'm kind of quick to pad in places, and like kind of throw my Divine Storms out as quickly as possible, but is something that can't necessarily be helped at times. So I get the Gore Splatter. Drain Fluid's about to go out, and our Boomy clears it. Kind of these average burst windows of 16, 17k without wings is nice, but I think I need to do some more practice because I am seeing Rets pull higher, and I don't know if that's just because I am running lower gear at this point than my usual build, or if it's something else that I'm doing wrong. Like, does my burst priority change or something like that? It's something I'm going to have to work on. But yeah, these packs pretty much go off without instant. I think my wings usage in this dungeon was somewhat better than my Spires of Ascension. I seem to be more focused on using the wings as soon as it comes off. Like, I will use it here for this next pack. I got a request through, and I was wondering what the hell that was. So I'd received a friend request. Now, this particular part, as some of you may or may not know, Paladins with Bop can immune one, if not both, of these morbid fixations. Now, both is if you get targeted with them. There is some overlap, however, in that you will have forbearance between them. So, realistically, you're going to want... You can immune one as a paladin with Bob, no matter who that's on, and then the second will have to be kited. Now, because both Time and I are present, we were going to try and double bop, but we ended up then kind of just saving a bop once we realized the forbearance was still a problem. And it targeted our hunter, which was good because it allowed for kiting much easier. So we're about to go into a situation where I can use my 1 minute bursts while we wait for wings, and we go. Now you see, this is a little bit better. I hit nearly 30k without wings, but again, my positioning awareness is kind of gone out the window, and I get clobbered by a bleed, which is really punishing on fortified weeks and is forcing Time to have to heal me a lot more than trying to contribute to damage. One thing that does catch me off guard, though, is this next bleed that's about to come in. Because I moved out of the way, and then it turned further to the right to catch me in the frontal cone. Which forced my lay on hands, basically. And there's the third one. So I got clobbered by 3 of those gore things, and I think this is very nearly going to kill me. Yeah, I have to self-wog a few times. So, with this particular build, I need to be much more positionally aware, is the main feedback for this dungeon. Now, one thing that I will say is hitting nearly 45k DPS, very, very nice. What wasn't particularly nice, however, is the fact that Rot Spew seems to absolutely fall in love with me here. He targets me for every single one of these. So I'm there just being like, what? Why? Okay, I just sod off. Why? Another spew disease, and I'm, you know, near dead, so Time has to use his lay on hands there to keep me alive. I wog, I try and help. Turns out that one there was actually targeted on Time, but Time ran onto me. But that one's on me again, and I don't know how I'm alive at this point. Having the shield from Word of Glories maybe keeping me alive there when nothing else had the right to. Anyway, we've got 7 minutes for Stitch Flesh and Nalthor, and this is going to be pretty easy because we're going to use most of the weapons here on Stitch Flesh and just shred him a new one. So, pretty easy. Probably should have Final Reckoninged after using the hammer, but doing it that way kind of enabled there to be the moment of aggro needed for our tank, so I don't just get melee slapped by Stitch Flesh. Now, thankfully, because you know that the second hook that comes out from that guy, Stitch Flesh is going to be back on his platform, you can pre-aim it, which is nice because it means he immediately comes back down. But due to the change of this fight and the ramping damage that these things do the longer they stay alive, it does force you to either have to deal with the ads or deal with Stitch Flesh as quickly as you can, which we did. So 2 minutes something for Stitch Flesh, which leaves us more than enough time to kill the final boss. Just checking my score. to see what my highest necrotic wake was, and me being the dark blonde that I am, closer to brown nowadays, but yeah, either which way, me being blonde, forgot that, oh, you did the 19 a couple of days ago, moron. It's like, yeah. So, pretty much not much to say about this fight, really. We start off with the spear. Interesting point of note for the storming and the comet storm. The comet storm actually stops on a Z-axis. So, being thrown up in the air meant that I had them stacked multiple times. Or at least that's how it worked for this particular pull. I don't know if that's intended or if it's just I was fortunate. Because I genuinely thought I was about to die when I got caught, but I seemed to fall below where they hit. Now, Ret Paladins without damage are kind of alright here. I'd have much preferred having, you know, a little bit more to play with, because I actually burnt Wake there because I was worried about how many stacks I was going to generate, because I'm at 4 stacks. Probably should have looked to maybe just like having a little bit more or better gear, I guess, and holding everything for coming back up when I had 100% crit. Now, that was a kind of an unfortunate dispel timing, freezing me in place, but we just burned freedom and cracked on. Because having 100% crit here with Wake as well would have been quite nice. Because our execution sentence there hit for about 36k, I think. Which is alright. It's not huge by any stretch of the imagination, but it's, you know, it's decent. I think massive case of patience required, young whippersnapper, was probably the call. And also the fact that I sat on wings here at the end when I should have just spent it is kind of another thing. So the takeaway then for this 20 necrotic key, first and foremost, interrupts. We need to work on our interrupts and we need to call them. So we don't double stack, or I need to get used to marking. So I might look into keybinding the star marker and call that as my marker. So I will get first kick on star, or I will get second kick on star if I know it's problematic and we're likely to get the tank or someone else to kick. Looking at the Goliaths in Spires of Ascension, for instance, because obviously you guys saw that particular dungeon. Or maybe a Engorge kick in Sanguine Depths. Another example. The next port of call will be positioning. I need to be more aware of where I'm aiming my Tempest to Lightbringers. Thankfully, there were no mispulls or misplays with regards to that. But in the same vein, kind of like if I'm using a bow staff or something like that, I also need to be wary of the other end of it. So it's not just necessarily where I'm facing and where I'm aiming, it's also what I'm stood in or what's behind me. Those shadow wells leading up to the second boss, leading up to a Marth being a perfect example. Now, kind of the constructive points aside, the overall damage profile and the gear itself, I finished the dungeon on 9k. 9k DPS overall, which is good. Is certainly one of my higher values, but given the gear, or given how other people perform with this gear, I think I'm lacking certain bits, and it's something I will have to practice in the next fortified week when we come back around to it. Now, I can definitely see the merit of using Tempest to Lightbringer, and as a result, I think I'm probably going to have to update my 9.1 guide. And I'm going to have to practice playing with Ocular Gland more, because unfortunately my Ocular Gland is only a heroic. It's 239, and I'm not likely to get a mythic version until after my guild clears Sylvanas. Because we're just not re-clearing it anymore, and we haven't re-cleared for weeks. And unless they decide that, you know, come Kel'Thuzad or come Sylvanas, they want me to play my Warlock rather than my Paladin's not going to be able to have a lockout spare to go re-clear. So we're just going to have to practice with the 124 stat that it gives me, which is still a reasonable amount of stat, don't get me wrong. But the main part that I am going to have to work around is the taking unnecessary damage and losing stats for it. Because as this particular dungeon showed, I take a lot of unnecessary damage, and it's not necessarily damage that I realized in the past was so detrimental. It definitely puts a spin on being above 50% health. So whereas in the past I might have taken the damage, gone, ah shit, fuck it, I can just wog quickly, that'd be fine. But now, because there's an actual debuff there going, oi, numbnuts, you're losing 124 mastery, and it's an active DPS downgrade at that point, it definitely opens your eyes. So I definitely agree that it is a good trinket, but it might be a good trinket more because it forces you to play better. Otherwise, it becomes a detriment. Now, I'm going to end this video here, because I appreciate that it's approaching the 40-minute mark, and I will also be shortly releasing a weekly update video with regards to my Mythic Plus chest, and what we got in it for the week, and what the game plan is for this week, both in terms of the channel, raiding, and everything else Orabox. So, on that note, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you very shortly in the next video. Take care, folks, and have a good one.